First at 5. From the University of Florida, covering Gainesville, Ocala, and the University of Florida, this is WUFT News, First at 5.
The University of Florida is now investigating a second complaint of fraternity hazing. That's our top story. I'm Ricardo Navarro.
And I'm Janelle Richards. Though it's an older case, UF is determined to root out hazing, and a new task force is charged with making progress. WFT's Janelle has more.
At a UF fraternity dates back 2 years and comes on the heels of a recent complaint about Alpha Phi Alpha. Members of a UF task force formed after the FAMU tragedy know that hazing is a long-term cultural problem.
And can we break a cycle which is really based in something that was a practice over 100 years ago?
The Anti-Hazing Task Force has been reviewing previous studies showing just how influential the culture of hazing has become at other schools. They need students to act as whistleblowers.
After the hazing death of Armand Pertamian at Geneseo State, the same outcry that has come with chilling regularity.
I think maybe the students that were affected by it negatively would come forward, but I don't think that major members of the Greek system would, because I think it's something that's part of their tradition and their history.
The Anti-Hazing Task Force stressed how broad and widespread the issue of hazing is, reporting 47% of high school students are hazed before they enter a college campus.
There's enough history out there to demonstrate that it is not just black fraternities or a cultural problem. It is an overall problem.
The UF task force is talking about a student-led task force and maybe posting hazing violations on the websites of student organizations.
I think putting a link on the website would be a good idea, because if people were actually looking into it, then they were already kind of willing to say something. So if they find a link, it would be a way for them to say something.
Ultimately, the task force hopes to remove the stigma about speaking out. Janelle Lewis, WUFT News.
The task force will wait for the police report on the allegations against Alpha Phi Alpha before issuing any sanctions. And a new development tonight in that fatal hazing case at Florida A&M. The parents of drum major killed during a hazing ritual are now suing the owner and the driver of the charter bus in which the hazing took place. Robert Champion suffered deadly blows after a football game in Orlando, a rite of passage for him to become the top drum major next year. The new lawsuit claims the managers of the bus company knew band members regularly held hazing rituals while on the bus after games, but didn't do anything to stop them.
A man is behind bars after he's charged with first-degree murder and aggravated child abuse of a 1-year-old girl in Gainesville. We go to WFT's Kelsey Peck with more on that story.
Alachua County Sheriff deputies have made an arrest in the case of a murdered 1-year-old. Deputies say this man, 24-year-old Christopher Strotter, killed his then-girlfriend's young daughter. The medical examiner and Strotter have conflicting accounts of that fateful day. Gainesville neighborhood where 1-year-old Camilla Strotter suffered a severe brain injury back in November of 2010, which she later died from. When deputies arrived on the scene, the father's explanation of what happened that November day seemed to make sense.
The defendant was able to describe that he left his child on the counter of the kitchen and went into a bedroom to retrieve a sippy cup. While he was in that other room, heard a thump type noise and came back into the kitchen to discover that the child had fallen off the counter and onto the floor.
But an autopsy cast doubt on Christopher Strotter's account.
It was quite clear to the ME that the injuries were not consistent with a fall of this type from a countertop. It was much more severe than that, and they ruled the death as a homicide.
Strotter was arrested yesterday morning. His bail is set at $1.2 million. According to the Alachua County Clerk of Court's website, Strotter will be arraigned on March 5th. I'm Kelsey Peck, WUFT News.
A bill inspired by 2-year-old Kaylee Anthony's death is under consideration in the Florida legislature. The bill was crafted after Kaylee's mother, Casey Anthony, was convicted of lying to investigators. It would increase the maximum penalty for 5 years for knowingly lying to police about a missing child. A Florida House subcommittee approved the bill today. In the Senate, the legislation is also still in committee.
And a battle over whether to privatize a good portion of Florida's prisons is going down to the wire in the Florida Senate. The measure could pass or fail by a single vote. The jobs of nearly 4,000 prison employees in 26 South Florida facilities could be affected.
And we're warming up, but some rain may be in the mix too.
Christian Camrath joins us from the WRUF Weather Center with when we could break out the shorts. Christian?
You could put on a pair of shorts, but you might want to grab your umbrella for your night out tonight during Valentine's Day. Take a look at our Gator Doppler radar right now. You can see those showers are starting to develop here across north central Florida. We could see some showers mostly near Gainesville, all the way from Cedar Key to Lake City up into Jacksonville over the next few hours. So an umbrella is a sure thing to bring out for your Valentine's Day. Now looking at 8 p.m. tonight, we are looking at a much more mild 65 degrees, not nearly as cool as we've seen just a couple of nights ago, but a few showers possible and actually likely for us here in Gainesville and for a majority of north central Florida. Looking into midnight, we could see some fog overnight, and coming up in the main part of my forecast, we're going to have a look at when we can see some chance of rain later this week, as well as a look at your WRUF TV 6-day outlook. Janelle?
Thanks, Christian. A Georgia family killed in the Paynes Prairie I-75 crashes will be laid to rest Wednesday in their native Brazil. Memorial services were held Monday in Marietta. Jose Carmo was killed along with his wife, teenage daughter, and 2 others while traveling home from Orlando. 15-year-old Lydian Carmo, the only family survivor, is still hospitalized. And Whitney Houston's funeral will be by invitation only in her childhood church. A funeral service for the pop star is scheduled for Saturday in Newark. No public memorial has been arranged yet. Houston died Saturday in her room at the Beverly Hilton Hotel in California.
A revised lawsuit has been filed in Miami, adding more plaintiffs and claims that seek millions of dollars in damages for last month's Italian cruise ship disaster. The lawsuit now includes 39 plaintiffs who were aboard the Costa Concordia. At least 17 people died and 15 are still missing.
I don't believe that I've ever seen conduct that rises to the level of this type of careless disregard for human life and safety.
More lawsuits may be filed later. NASA's space program is facing huge budget cuts next year and eliminates 2 Mars missions. But officials say that budget also represents an attempt to keep the next launch of astronauts from Florida's Cape Canaveral on track. NBC's Dan Billow has more.
We've made steady and tangible progress on the next generation deep space crew capsule.
NASA's efforts to get astronauts back onto Cape Canaveral launch pads come in 3 shapes. One, the Orion capsule, a government-built Apollo-style spacecraft that's being heavily tested. It's funded at $1 billion in the new 2013 federal budget request. 2, a planned super rocket, bigger than anything ever launched, needed to get astronauts to distant locations in the Orion capsule. It's funded at about $2 billion. And 3, private companies building their own spaceships for commercial launches using NASA's money along with their own. Here's the schedule. The Orion capsule test launches with no one on board in 2014. The first commercial launch could come in 2017. That's 2 to 3 years later than last year's plan. The first astronaut launch of the Orion capsule on the new super rocket is 2021. And Mars, mid-2030s if it happens.
Everyone is reducing their budgets. That's the only thing we can do.
The new NASA budget eliminates 2 Mars missions that would have launched unmanned probes in 2016 and 18. That's 2 fewer launches for the Cape. But in the meantime, the local workforce starts to ramp up for the future in 2014, replacing about 1,000 of the 8,000 lost shuttle jobs.
Is it going to bring a lot of new work? Not in this year coming up, but it's going to allow us to keep the workforce that we have working and build on what we've already set in motion.
UF has invented a new system to squeeze in up to 2,000 more undergrads without breaking the bank.
We'll explain how that will work. Also ahead, find out why Ocala was ranked one of the worst places to be single on this Valentine's Day. That's all coming up in just 90 seconds.